Story 1. I've cleaned up a lot of dark places in my life. Crime scenes, fires, deaths no one was there to witness. You develop a kind of armor after a while, a professional distance. You tell yourself it's just a job, just a room, just walls and carpet and whatever got left behind. But there was one house that made me question everything I thought I knew. And I still think about it. It was the late 90s. I was running a trauma cleanup crew out of Los Angeles, the kind of work most people don't even know exists. When something terrible happened inside a building, we were the ones who came after. After the police tape came down, after everyone else had gone home, we'd get dispatched with barely any information. Sometimes just a few words: vehicle impact, fatality, or fire damage, multiple deceased. You learned not to ask too many questions. You suited up. You went in. You did what needed to be done. This particular call brought us out to the outskirts of the city, a quiet neighborhood, working class homes from the 50s, the kind with little driveways and window boxes and neighbors who wave from their porches, the kind of street where nothing bad is supposed to happen. We pulled up to a ranch-style house. The garage door was open, and sitting inside was an old woman, alone, just sitting there in the dark of her garage, smoking a cigarette. She had a sofa in there, a TV, piles of clothes. She had moved out of her own home. I walked up and introduced myself, told her I was sorry for her loss, that we were there to help. She looked at me the way people look at you when they've already decided nothing can help. I asked if she'd like to show me where the incident occurred. She said, "I'm not going back in that house." She pointed at a window, front bedroom, and she just looked at it, the way you look at something you're afraid might look back. I've dealt with a lot of grief, a lot of shock, a lot of people who couldn't bring themselves to step back inside a place where they'd lost someone. That part wasn't unusual, but then she started talking. She said her son had taken his life in that room. I offered the standard condolences. I was about to ask about salvaging any belongings from inside when she stopped me. She said, "You don't understand." She said there were evil spirits in that house. I didn't respond. You hear a lot of things in this line of work. You learn to just listen. She said that a year before, her other son had also died inside that house. Same way. She said the demons had taken him too. I stayed very still. Then she said that a few years before that, her husband, 3 people, same house, same way, gone. I've learned to read people in grief. I've sat with the confused, the devastated, the ones who've lost their grip on reality. I know what mental illness looks like in those moments. This wasn't that. This was a woman who was terrified, who hadn't slept in her own bed in. I didn't even want to guess. She wasn't reaching for an explanation because she needed one. She already had one, and she believed it with every part of her. She signed our paperwork, told us we could dispose of anything inside. You can burn the whole place down for all I care. We suited up and went in. The bedroom was small, blue walls, a little messy. At first glance, almost ordinary. And then you noticed everything else. There was blood at the foot of the bed, vomit on the mattress, and on one entire wall, writing, in blood, covering the whole surface. We could only make out some of the words, and the ones we could make out didn't seem to be in English. We later learned what had happened. The son had swallowed acid, then he'd done something else I won't describe in detail, and somehow, in those final moments, he had covered that wall. We cut out the carpet, wrapped the mattress, cleaned every surface until there was no trace left. We were in that house for a few hours. The whole time, it felt wrong. Not wrong like a smell or a temperature, though the air was thick and heavy and foul in a way that I can't quite put words to. It felt wrong like the walls themselves were aware of you, like the room was waiting for something. We all felt it. Not one of us said anything, but we all moved a little faster, finished a little sooner, didn't linger. Before we left, the old woman had already gone. Someone had come to take her away. I locked up the house behind me, walked back to the truck, and I just sat there for a minute. Before that job, I wouldn't have said I believed in anything like that. Evil in a place, darkness that stays. But that house took 3 people from that woman over the course of a few years. And whatever was in there, she could feel it. So could we. I still don't know how to fully explain what I experienced inside that bedroom. I've been in dozens of places just as bad on paper. Worse even. None of them felt like that. I locked that door behind me. And sometimes I wonder if whatever was inside it noticed. Story 2. I was 18. My dad had passed away 3 years before that. I was close to graduating, and my final physics exam was giving me everything I had. Relativity, time dilation, all of it felt like trying to read a language nobody taught me. I was drowning, and I knew it. That morning, I hadn't slept. Not really. I remember sitting in the last row of my classroom, that heavy, almost physical kind of tiredness, where your eyelids just start to give up without asking your permission. My teacher was up at the front, talking. I could hear the words. I just couldn't hold on to them anymore. And then, just as my eyes were beginning to close, I heard his voice, clear as day, his exact tone, the way he used to say my name when he was in a good mood, almost like he was singing it. That familiar melody I hadn't heard in 3 years, not on the phone, not in a recording, not anywhere, and yet there it was, right next to my ear. Hey, wake up and listen. I sat up so fast, I knocked my notebook off the desk. For a second, I just froze. My heart was going, my hands were cold. I looked around, and nobody was reacting. Nobody else had heard anything. And the teacher was standing at the board, writing something down, saying words I was now actually hearing. That was the moment she dropped the hint. The one hint that told us what the final exam would actually focus on. The specific corner of physics I had completely ignored because I was studying the wrong thing entirely. If I had missed that moment, I would have walked into the most important test of my year completely unprepared. But I didn't miss it because something or someone pulled me back. I didn't tell anyone that day. I just sat there with a shaking pen and wrote everything down. And later that night, I went home and studied the right material. I still can't fully explain what happened, but what I can tell you is this. That voice saved my grade, maybe more than that. And here's the part that still gets me, even now. That same night, I dreamed. Me and my dad sitting on our porch together. Just the two of us, the way it used to be. Laughing, talking about nothing important. And we were drinking his favorite beer, the one he always had on summer evenings. I remember looking down at my glass as I finished the last sip. The sun was low. Everything was golden and warm and quiet. And when I looked over at the chair next to me, he was gone. Just the empty chair, the evening light. And then, one more time, so soft I almost didn't catch it. Hey, wake up. My alarm clock went off the exact second those words landed. I just lay there in my bed for a while, not crying, not scared, just still, because whatever that was, it didn't feel like something to be afraid of. It felt like someone making sure I was going to be okay. I've never told this story to anyone, not a single person. I kept it to myself for 4 years because some things feel too real, too personal to just hand over to the world. But tonight it felt like the right time. So if you're still here, thank you for listening. I think he'd be glad someone finally heard it. Story 3. Ali grew up in a house that felt wrong. Not wrong like bad memories or a rough childhood, though there was that too. Wrong like the air was heavier inside than out. Wrong like something was always just slightly off. and you could never quite put your finger on what. I slept with the lights on every single night for years. I never once felt at ease in that house. It started small, the way these things always do. Things would go missing. A stuffed animal I hadn't seen in months, just gone. And then one morning I'd walk downstairs, and there it would be, sitting right on top of a pile of clean laundry. Laundry I had washed myself, folded myself, set down not an hour before, right on top, like someone wanted me to find it. Books were another thing. I'd be halfway through a paperback, set it on my nightstand, fall asleep, wake up, and it's just not there. No big deal, right? I'd search for days, nothing. Then one morning, I'd find it flat on the floor, at the foot of my bed, like someone had been reading it, and just left it there when they were done. The kitchen was bad too, the good scissors, the nice knife. Here one day, gone the next, and then back in the knife block, like they never left. Forks showing up on random end tables. Nobody knew how they got there. Nobody ever asked after a while. You stop asking after a while. But the one that really got under my skin, I was looking for my glasses one afternoon, just wandering the house, checking counters, retracing my steps. I turn around, and they're right there, on the floor, behind me, in the spot I had just been standing. I hated that. I still hate thinking about that. Out in the yard, there was a patch of dead grass. Now I know that sounds like nothing. Yards have dead patches. But this was different. 3 feet wide, 6 feet long, a perfect rectangle where nothing would grow, no matter what anyone did. My dad would reseed it every spring. Nothing. He blamed it on the old railroad that used to run through the property, said something industrial must have been buried there. But that's not what it felt like. It felt like something was watching you from that spot. We had landscaped the whole yard around it. Flowers, shrubs, a little circular garden. And right in the center of all that dead rectangle, sitting there, quiet, patient. I never went near it if I could help it. Then there was the gravel. Our front path was lined with gravel, and you'd hear it, footsteps, a slow, steady crunch, 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 like someone walking up toward the house. It happened so often, I stopped reacting to it. You'd hear the gravel, and then the porch swing would start to creak, metal on metal. That low, rusty groan, back and forth, for an hour sometimes, maybe more. And every time we'd look outside, nobody there. The swing just moving on its own, under a covered porch, sheltered from the wind, with no good reason in the world to be moving at all. My boyfriend, he's my husband now, he hated the mirror in my bedroom. It was an old mirror, hung on the wall directly across from my bed. He refused to stay the night if it was uncovered, made me drape a blanket over it every time he came over. I thought he was being dramatic. I laughed about it. I should not have laughed about it. One night I was half asleep and the blanket had slipped off. The room was dark, and in that mirror I saw her. Just for a second, a flash, a woman in white, a long white dress, almost like a wedding gown, and the angle she was at, she was either floating or she wasn't standing at all. I got that mirror off the wall the next morning. My parents weren't happy about it. I didn't care. When my husband saw it was gone, you know what he said? He said, "Did you finally see the lady?" Sharing this now, I feel a little sick. But here's the one that still messes with me. Even now, my husband and I were teenagers, upstairs, doing exactly what teenagers aren't supposed to be doing when they're home alone, and we hear a voice, a woman's voice, clear as anything, call out from downstairs, "Hey, Rosie wants out." Rosie was our dog. We scrambled, dressed in about 4 seconds flat. That full body panic of 2 teenagers who are absolutely completely caught. I ran downstairs. My husband stayed up, probably trying to figure out how to climb out the window. Nobody was home, no cars in the driveway, nothing on, nothing moved. Just Rosie, cowering under the table, shaking, wouldn't come out. I called my mom. She was at work. I could hear the noise of her office in the background. She hadn't been home. Nobody had been home. We did not go outside that afternoon. And here's the last piece, the one I almost forgot. Our house was surrounded by pine trees, a thick little grove on all sides. My mom had one rule about those trees. The blinds stay shut after dark, always. Floodlight on if you're walking the dog, no exceptions. For years I thought she was just being weird. Then one afternoon she said something, casually, almost like a joke. She said she'd seen something once, moving through those trees, hopping through the trees, and that was enough for her. She never explained what it looked like. I never asked, and I think I'm okay with that. Some things you just don't need to know more about. That house is behind me now, years behind me, but some nights, when it's quiet and the wind picks up outside, I still listen for gravel. Story 4. It was the first time I was ever home alone. Overnight, I was maybe 13, maybe 15, old enough to handle myself, but young enough that the dark still felt a little too dark, you know? My parents had the good bed, the comfortable one, and they had a TV in their room, so that's where I set up for the night, their bedroom. First floor, lights off. Outside, cornfields stretching for miles behind the house. A small church across the road, barely 30 members in the whole congregation. Elderly neighbors tucked quietly on either side. The kind of place where nothing ever really happened. We never even locked our doors. Never needed to. And then, somewhere in the deep quiet of the night, I heard it, whistling, right outside the window. Not a song I recognized, not exactly tuneless either. It was actually kind of pretty, a slow, wandering melody, almost peaceful, if it hadn't been drifting through the dark at 2 a.m. But here's the thing, right beneath that window was a dense strip of ivy and shrubs, the kind that crunches and snaps if you even think about walking through it. I heard no footsteps, no rustling leaves, no breaking branches, just the whistling, moving slowly, back and forth, like whoever it was just strolling. Right there, a few feet from where I was lying, something was wrong. I stayed completely still. The melody drifted, back and forth, and then, gradually, it began to move away, toward the road, fading into the dark. The moment I couldn't hear it anymore, I ran. Every door in the house. I checked every single one, locked them, all of them. Then I grabbed a kitchen knife, pulled the covers up over my head, and waited for morning. Now here's what kept me awake long after that night. Behind our house wasn't another neighborhood, wasn't another road. It was a small patch of woods, and beyond that, cornfields. Miles and miles of empty cornfields. So where did this person come from? Where were they going? Who just wanders through someone's yard at 2 a.m, whistling through the ivy, leaving no sound of footsteps, and then disappears into the night? We lived in a town with maybe 100 people, total, the kind of place where if something strange happened, everyone knew about it by breakfast. Nothing, not a word, not from anyone. I went on to spend plenty more nights alone in that house, and nothing like that ever happened again. I know there's probably a rational explanation. There has to be, right? Some logical reason why an adult would be drifting through a dark yard in a rural farming town in the middle of the night, whistling a pretty little tune through the bushes, without making a single sound as they walked. Right? I still don't know what was out there that night, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. Story 5. It was the summer of 1999, and I still don't fully know what I saw. We were on our way back to Murray, me and my 3 kids in the car, cutting through land between the lakes as the evening light started to fade. Nothing unusual, just a familiar drive. But then the sky changed. I mean, it changed fast. The kind of fast that makes your stomach drop. Clouds stacked up out of nowhere, heavy and dark. And then, all at once, the air went completely still. No wind, no sound, just this cold that rolled in from nowhere. And I felt it. That feeling you can't explain, like something was warning me. I pressed the gas a little harder. Something in me said, get through LBL, get home, get the kids home, before that storm breaks. I knew we wouldn't make it in time, but I kept driving anyway. That's when I saw it, right there at Fenton. That little stretch just before the bridge, pulled off to the side of the road, a Conestoga wagon. Now look, I've driven that road 100 times. I know what belongs there and what doesn't. And this did not belong. The cover of the wagon, pure white, not off-white, not sun-faded canvas white. I'm talking glowing, almost luminous, like it was lit from somewhere inside. And the horses in front, 2 of them, matching, the same impossible white. I slowed down without even thinking about it. My foot just came off the gas. Who does that? Who just sits at the side of a road like that, not moving? The man at the reins didn't look at us, didn't turn his head, just sat there, still as stone, while everything around him was about to come apart. I called back to my kids. You're seeing this? We passed it in seconds, maybe less. And my kids, the older 2, looked up and said they hadn't seen anything unusual. No wagon, no horses, nothing. The moment we cleared it, that exact moment, the storm broke. Rain like a wall, wind that shook the car. One of the worst I can remember, but we made it through. We got home safe. I've tried to explain it away 100 times since. Maybe it was a reenactment. Maybe someone pulled off for the weather. I've held on to that. But here's the thing I can't shake. No canvas cover, no matter how new, is that white, that bright, that clean, and 2 perfectly matched white horses out there on that road right before a storm, with a man who didn't even glance our way. My kids didn't see it, but I did. And whatever it was, I'm still not sure it wanted to be seen by everyone. I still don't know what that was out there on that road. And some nights, I think I'm better off not knowing. Story 6. I was 5, maybe 6. We're talking 30-something years of not knowing what I saw. It started on a quiet night, the kind of night where everything in the house feels too still. I woke up suddenly, and I didn't know why. No sound, no movement. Just that feeling. You know the one. That feeling that something in the room has changed. I opened my eyes slowly. The room was dark, almost completely dark, except for a thin strip of orange light bleeding in from a street lamp outside, just enough to see shapes, just enough to make you wish you couldn't. And that's when I saw it, in the corner, by the closet. Something crouched. At first I thought, okay, that's probably just clothes on a chair. That's a thing. That happens. I tried to convince myself. I really did. But my parents swear, to this day, there was no chair in that room. So what was it? It was small, about the size of a medium dog, but it was not a dog. It had long arms, long fingers, no neck, just a head sitting directly on its shoulders, hunched forward like it was folded in on itself, and it was watching me. I could feel it watching me. Then it smiled, a mouth full of long yellow teeth, and eyes shining in the dark, just glowing. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just laid there in my bed, staring at this thing, and it stared right back. As my eyes adjusted, it got clearer and clearer, which somehow made it so much worse. That's when I made my move. I crawled out of bed, back pressed flat against the wall, and I inched toward the door without turning away from it. Step by step, eyes locked on those shining eyes, and it didn't move. It just watched me go. slowly turning its head as I crept toward the door. I bolted, closed the door behind me, ran to the living room where the TV was still on, and I laid down on the floor in the light, and I did not move again until morning. I never told my parents, not then anyway, because in my 5-year-old brain, I convinced myself that it was just a bad dream, a nightmare, the kind that feels too real. And for years, I held on to that. But here's where it gets weird. I'm an adult now, sitting with my parents, just talking. You know, one of those random nights where old memories start bubbling up, and I mention it almost offhand. Like, hey, you guys remember that room I had when I was little? And I told them the story. And my mom, she looked at me funny, and she said, "Oh wow, I can't believe you remember that." I felt my stomach drop. Wait, what? That actually happened? And then she said it. She said, and I quote, "That was great-grandma's orangutan. She'd been fostering her for a few months. At some point in the night, she got out and went to your room. She loved you so much. She was probably just checking on you." I sat there in silence. All those years of thinking I had seen something inhuman, something dark, something with yellow teeth and glowing eyes crouched in my corner at 3 a.m, and it was a baby orangutan who loved me, who just wanted to see if I was okay. I locked her in when I ran, which means she was probably just sitting there in my dark room, alone, wondering why I left so fast. To this day, I don't know if that makes it better or worse, because here's the thing that gets me. Even now, I can still see those eyes in the dark. I can still feel that moment of pure, frozen terror. And somewhere in this world, a little orangutan once crawled into a sleeping child's room in the middle of the night just to check on them, and that child screamed and ran. I think about that a lot. Story 7. I was 22, living in this old brick house, the kind of place with creaky floors, dim hallways, and a history nobody really wanted to talk about. It was a fraternity house. I was the live-in president, and my room right next to the porch where we always left the lights on, because honestly, none of us liked the dark in that house. We just never admitted it. It started the way most things do, as a joke. Late one night, or I guess early morning, a bunch of us were up, just hanging out, talking trash, killing time, and then someone brought it up. The house, the stories. Apparently there was this whole thing about a skeleton being found on the property, a woman in white wandering the halls, a boy that appeared at night near the back stairwell. I laughed, told them it was all nonsense. Big mistake. I'm not exaggerating when I say that was the night everything changed. A few hours later, I was asleep, and then I wasn't, not really. I slid into this strange half-dream state, what they call lucid dreaming. Most of it's gone now, fuzzy, but the last part, I remember every second of that. I was in a grocery store, hiding under a checkout counter. I don't know what I was hiding from. I just knew I couldn't let it see me. Someone was checking out above me, and then a carton of milk slipped. Cold liquid poured down my back, and I felt it, really felt it. That icy rush, sharp and real, like a bucket of ice water in the middle of July. That's when I woke up. The first thing I heard was a scream, a woman's scream, loud, close, coming from the porch right outside my wall. I sat up, figured one of the guys had done something stupid. You know how it goes. I just waited for the knock at my door. And then I heard footsteps, heavy ones, pounding through the kitchen next to the porch, crossing the tile floor, moving down the hall toward my room, getting closer and closer. They stopped right outside my door. No knock, nothing, just silence. And then something in my room moved. I turned. I still don't fully know how to describe what I saw. It was massive, a figure, dark, not just like someone standing in shadow, but black, solid, deep black, like a hole cut out of the room. It had the shape of a huge man, wide shoulders, and it was wearing a hat, a wide-brimmed hat, and a coat. No eyes, no mouth, just the outline of a face, and it was leaning toward me, closer and closer, until it was maybe 3 inches from my face. And that's when my entire body just stopped. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I couldn't even scream. And trust me, every part of me wanted to. I felt like I was choking, like something invisible had its hand around my throat. We just stayed there, face to face, me frozen, it staring, for what felt like forever. And then it was gone, just like that. I could move again, but I just lay there, completely drained, like someone had reached inside me and turned off every light. I've run races, stayed up for 40 hours, pulled all-nighters during finals. Nothing has ever left me feeling that empty. That was the first time in my life I felt real, genuine terror. Not the fun kind, not jump scare stuff. The kind that gets into you, the kind you can't shake. And that was just the beginning, because it didn't stop. For weeks after that, I'd hear knocking at my door in the middle of the night. Open it. No one there. I'd hear breathing just outside my room. I'd be home alone and hear someone switching off the lights down the hall. One by one, getting closer. Other people started seeing it too. Always after nightmares. Always the same figure. And then one day someone saw it in the daylight. That was it for me. I packed a bag and drove back to my parents' house that same week. Here's the thing that still gets me though. It wasn't just lingering energy. You know how people say places hold on to feelings, residue from the past? This wasn't that. This thing was deliberate. It messed with specific people at specific times. It showed up after we talked about it. It followed us from room to room. It knew we were there. That's not a haunting. That's something aware, something with intent. So if you ever feel like you want to test a spirit, challenge something in the dark, don't. I'm serious. Just don't. Because whatever that thing was, the hat man, the shadow, whatever you want to call it, it heard me laugh that night, and it made sure I knew it. I still dread seeing that figure again, and deep down, I think it knows that too. Story 8. It was the summer I turned 11. My parents sent me to stay with my grandparents for a few months. One of those long, lazy summers where the days stretch on forever and the nights feel different, quieter than they should be. Their house was in a small town in the Midwest, nice neighborhood, normal street, the kind of place where nothing ever really happens. I had my own room, the guest room, right at the end of the hall. The door stayed open at night. That was just how I slept. And for the first few weeks, everything was completely fine. Then one night, I woke up. I don't know what woke me. No sound, no nightmare, just consciousness, arriving all at once, like something had pulled me out of sleep on purpose. And when I opened my eyes, there was someone standing in the doorway. At first, I wasn't scared. The room was dim, and I'd just woken up, and my brain did what brains do. It filled in the blanks. I thought it was my grandmother. She sometimes checked on me at night, so it made sense. I called out to her, something like, "Hey Nana, I'm okay." But she didn't answer, and that's when I started to look more carefully. The figure was the right height, the right shape, standing exactly where my grandmother would stand. But the face was wrong. It was distorted in a way I still don't have words for. Not like an injury or a mask. Wrong in a deeper way. Like someone had described a human face from memory and gotten most of it right, but not all of it. And it was staring at me, not glancing, not checking, staring, with an intensity that felt like pressure, like something behind those eyes was focused entirely, completely on me. I felt it before I fully understood it. That drop in your stomach, that cold that doesn't come from the air. I pulled my blanket over my head. I know that sounds like something a little kid does, and I was a little kid, but more than that, I had grown up in a house where strange things happened. I had learned very early that when something feels wrong in a way you can't explain, you don't look at it, you wait. So I waited, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears, breathing through my mouth because breathing through my nose felt too loud, counting seconds under the blanket, in the dark, not moving. I don't know how long I stayed like that, long enough that my legs went stiff, long enough that I started to convince myself I'd imagined it, long enough that the fear started to shift from sharp to dull. And then I looked. The doorway was empty, just the hole, just the familiar shapes of a normal house at night. I didn't sleep much after that, but here's what I didn't realize until recently. Sitting here, thinking about that summer, writing it all down, that wasn't the only time. There was another night, same house, same room, same setup, door open, me asleep, woken up for no reason I could name. And when I looked at the doorway that second time, it was something else entirely. The best way I can describe it is this. Imagine a figure made entirely of dull, dirty metal, like something that was supposed to look like a person, but whoever built it had never actually seen one. Too stiff, too angular, every joint slightly off. It stood in that doorway the same way the first thing had, perfectly still, watching. Except this time, the eyes were different. Everything else was dim and gray and wrong, but the eyes were bright, almost reflective, like 2 points of silver light in a face that had no business having light in it at all, and the feeling it gave me was identical to the first time. Not confusion, not curiosity, pure, cold terror, blanket over my head again, waiting in the dark again, too afraid to make a sound, too afraid to move, just enduring it. When I finally looked, gone, again. I never told my grandparents. I was 11. I didn't have the words, and part of me was afraid that if I said it out loud, I'd have to admit it was real. I'm almost 40 now, and I still don't have an explanation. I've thought about it from every angle. Sleep paralysis? Maybe. Hypnagogic hallucinations? Possibly. But those explanations have always felt like they fit around the experience, without quite touching the center of it. Because here's what I keep coming back to. Both times, I woke up first. No sound, no disturbance. Something woke me up, and then it was there. I still think about that doorway, and I still leave my bedroom door closed at night. Every single night. Because some part of me that is older than reason doesn't want to find out what happens if I look again. Story 9. I was 11 years old the first time I understood that some things can't be explained. And even now, even as an adult, I still think about that night. It was late, way past when I was supposed to be asleep. I had this little globe lamp on my nightstand, the kind that gets brighter every time you touch it. I left it on the dimmest setting, just enough light to read by. My stepdad Gary was away on a business trip, supposed to be back the next night. I had my door cracked open, just a sliver, not because I was scared, because I was sneaky. I could see straight down the hall to my mom's bedroom door. The second that door moved, I'd have just enough time to fake being asleep. So there I am, lost in a book, completely alone in the quiet house, and then something changed. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. Not yet. It was more like a feeling. That sudden, uncomfortable awareness that you are not alone. Like the air in the room shifted. I lowered my book, and that's when I saw it. A shape. Just a shape. An outline of a person, walking slowly past my cracked door. My first thought was Gary. He must have come home early. I called out to him. "Hey Gary," the shape stopped. Just stopped, mid-step, and then it turned, slowly, so slowly, toward my door, I remember my stomach dropping before I even understood why. Something about the way it moved was just wrong. The way someone moves when they have all the time in the world, when they don't need to hurry. It came into my room. I reached for my lamp. I don't know why. Maybe I thought more light would make it normal, would make it Gary, would make it anything other than what I was looking at. But every time my fingers touched the globe, it got brighter and brighter and brighter, and in that growing light, it didn't disappear, it got closer. There are no words I've found yet that describe what I saw. It wasn't a ghost from a movie. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a shape, a swirling dark outline of a person, standing right next to my nightstand, and then it leaned over me. I stopped breathing. I went completely rigid, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, pretending with everything I had that I was asleep. It hovered there for a few seconds that felt like entire years, then it straightened up, turned away, and slowly walked out of my room, down the hall, straight through my mom's closed bedroom door, straight through it. I didn't move until morning, not once. When the sun came up, I convinced myself it was a dream, an overactive imagination. I was a kid who loved scary books, that was all. I never told anyone, not because I didn't believe it, because I was embarrassed that I did. Gary came home the next night, just like planned, and that should have been the end of it. 7 years later, our family moved to a different neighborhood. New house, new street. One of Mom's neighbors, a woman named Diane, became close with us over time. One fall evening, they had a few people over to watch a football game. Someone put on one of those paranormal investigation shows after, the kind my mom usually avoided because of her faith. But Diane was excited about it. She went on and on about believing in the supernatural, about experiences she'd had, and then my mom surprised everyone in the room. She said she didn't really know what she believed, but she said she had this one experience, years ago, one she could never fully shake. The room got quiet. She said it was back when the kids were young. Gary had been on a business trip, was supposed to be home the next night. She said she jolted awake in the middle of the night. No alarm, no noise, just suddenly completely awake, and there was a shape in her room, a dark, shadowy outline of a person standing in the corner, watching her. She started praying. She didn't scream, didn't run. She just prayed, and eventually she said it was gone. I sat there and I felt the blood leave my face, because here is the thing you have to understand. I had never told my mom what happened to me that night. Not once, not a hint. I didn't want to get grounded for staying up. I didn't want to lose access to the scary books I read at my dad's house, and she had never told me her story either. She said she didn't want to frighten us kids. She didn't want a lecture from people at her church. So for 7 years, my mom and I both carried the exact same night, the exact same shape, the exact same silent visitor in the same house, on the same night. I still don't know what it was, and I've stopped trying to convince myself it wasn't real. Because the scariest part isn't the shadow that walked through walls. It's that it visited both of us, and we never even knew. Story 10. 6 hours, that's how long we were gone. 6 hours that felt like 15 minutes. I still don't know how to explain that without sounding completely out of my mind, but I need to tell someone, because whatever we walked into that night left something behind, in us, and honestly, I'm not sure it ever left. It started with the barn, a barn that burned down in our neighborhood under circumstances that made absolutely no sense. No one saw it happen. No one smelled smoke. No one heard a single crack of wood or a single alarm. And this thing, it was close. Close enough that you could see it from my mom's bedroom window. It sat on occupied land, right near the owner's house. It should have been impossible to miss. And yet, it was just gone one morning. burned all the way down to 3 cinder blocks sitting in the ash, 3 blocks and nothing else. Everyone in town had a theory. Nobody had an answer. Now, our town is small. I mean genuinely tiny. The kind of place where abandoned buildings outnumber people and the weekends feel like holding your breath. There's not a whole lot to do, so when my friend Jordan and I decided to walk out to the burn site one evening, it felt like just something to do. We had no idea what we were walking into. The walk itself takes maybe 5 minutes. We'd done it dozens of times before, just along that same stretch of open land. But this time, something shifted about halfway there. At first it was subtle, just a feeling, like when the sky changes before a storm comes in, and your body knows before your mind does. That low animal sense that something is wrong. We both felt it. Neither of us said anything yet. We just kept walking. But the closer we got, the heavier it became. That dread started sinking in like something physical, like pressure, like the air itself was pushing back. We should have turned around, I know that now, but we kept going. And then, right as we crossed into the space where the barn walls used to stand, everything stopped. Not just quiet, I mean stopped. The bugs, the crickets, every bird, every rustle of something small moving through the grass, all of it gone, like someone hit a mute button on the world around us. The silence was so complete, so sudden, that I felt it in my teeth. Jordan looked at me. I looked at Jordan. Neither of us had to say much. We both already knew. Something was watching us. We kept moving, slowly, and the further we went into what used to be the center of that barn, the stranger we felt. Not scared exactly, more like wrong, like our bodies weren't operating the way they were supposed to. Loose, wobbly, like the space between our thoughts was stretching out wider than it should have been. And then we started hearing things, not sounds you'd expect in the middle of a field at night, not wind, not animals. It sounded like a dinner party. I am not kidding you. It sounded like voices layered together, low and warm, the kind of background hum of people talking over each other at a table, shoes on a hard floor, the scrape of silverware against porcelain, pots and lids shifting somewhere, low music, like something playing from another room. It sounded like a house, a full lived-in house, sitting right there in the ashes of a burned barn in the middle of nowhere, and not a single cricket chirped. That's what I keep coming back to. Life had vanished, but this sound of life had taken its place. After that, things get hazy. We were talking to someone, or something. I know that much. I remember movement. I remember the feeling of a presence nearby. But the details, it's like trying to hold water. The more I reach for them, the more they slip through. We both got increasingly disoriented, confused, like our sense of time and space had just quietly come apart. At some point, we turned around, decided we'd had enough, started heading back toward my house. Except, we couldn't find it. We tried the doors of 2 different neighbors' houses, both of us genuinely convinced one of them was mine. Confused, stumbling around on a street I'd lived near my whole life, like it was somewhere I'd never been. When we finally made it back, we thought we'd been gone maybe 30 minutes, 40 tops. The walk is 5 minutes. We didn't feel like we'd been away long at all. I checked the time. 6 hours had passed. I just stood there staring at the clock, trying to make that number make sense. 6 hours, 5 of which existed in absolute blank space in both of our memories. 5 hours we cannot account for. 5 hours where we were somewhere with something and came back without knowing what happened. Jordan remembered even less than I did. It wasn't until about 6 months later, when we finally sat down and actually talked about it for the first time, that any of it started coming back to them at all. Like the memory had been stored somewhere it wasn't supposed to be accessed. Like our minds had quietly decided, you don't need to know this. It's safer if you don't. We were both sick for days after, and to this day, neither of us has ever gone back. I've tried to make sense of it. I've turned it over 100 times looking for the rational explanation. The land has its own history, old and heavy and wrong in ways people in the area don't talk about directly. There are stories. There have always been stories. And whatever lives in that ground, whatever moves through that space, it's old and it's aware. Whatever we walked into that night, it noticed us. Maybe it had been waiting a long time for someone to wander in close enough. Maybe what we heard was an echo of something that used to exist there, replaying over and over in some kind of loop that doesn't know it's supposed to be over. Maybe it was something else entirely, something that doesn't have a name in any language I know. I don't know. I just know that when we left, we weren't entirely the same. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That low hum of voices, shoes on the floor, the soft clink of silverware, and somewhere outside my window, the world goes very, very quiet. Story 11. It started the night my mom and I decided to walk to town. We had just moved to this tiny little place in Northern California, Millbrook they called it. Maybe 1,700 people, if you counted the farms on the outskirts. The nearest town was 5 miles out. Mom didn't have a car yet. The bus only came once a day. So we walked. And honestly, we didn't mind. The walk there was easy. Sun was still up. We grabbed what we needed from the store, had dinner at this little diner on the main strip, and by the time we started heading back, the sun was already going down. The only road in or out ran right along the highway. No sidewalks, no streetlights, nothing. Just pavement, pine trees, and darkness coming in fast. By the time we were halfway home, it was completely pitch black. Late in the year, sun goes down around 6, maybe 7, and out there, no lights, no houses nearby. The only time you could see anything was when a car passed, and then it was gone, and the dark swallowed everything again. But here's the thing, we weren't scared. I remember that clearly. I remember feeling calm, safe even. Mom and I were just talking, laughing a little, walking single file along the shoulder, me in front, her behind. And that's when the car slowed down. It was 2 teenagers from a neighboring property, a brother and sister, Jake and Mara Calloway. They recognized us from the area, pulled over, and offered us a ride. We were tired, it was cold, so we got in. And then Jake turned around from the passenger seat and asked, "What about your dad? Doesn't he want a ride?" Mom and I looked at each other. I said, "I don't have a dad, it's just us." Mara, who was driving, she saw our faces. She went quiet for a second. Then she asked again, slower this time, "Who was walking with you?" We told her, "No one, it was just us two. It's always been just us two." She and Jake looked at each other, and their faces changed. Mara told us that when they'd driven past us earlier, heading toward town, she noticed 3 people walking along the highway. Me in the front, my mom behind me, and behind her, a tall man. She said he looked like he was part of our conversation, like he was leaning in slightly, keeping pace. She just figured he was my dad. And when they drove back, we were still walking, all 3 of us, still in the same formation. And as they pulled up to offer the ride, she said she could still see him standing just behind my mom. Jake got out of the car with a flashlight. He walked the whole stretch of road, both sides, checked the tree line. There was nowhere to go, no turnoff, no ditch deep enough to hide in, no path through the brush, just flat highway and open land. He found nothing. We drove the rest of the way home, in complete silence. Mom reached back and held my hand. I didn't say anything. None of us did. I still think about that walk. I still think about how safe I felt. And sometimes I wonder, was that feeling coming from me? Or was it coming from something else entirely? Story 12. I'm not someone who believes in this kind of thing. I really want to make that clear before I tell you what happened. I grew up moving between countries, studying abroad, working in different cities across Europe. I was practical, rational, the kind of person who laughed at horoscopes and rolled my eyes at anything that couldn't be explained. And then my mother took me to see a man in a tiny village in Ukraine, and 7 years later, I'm still sitting with what he told me. Let me set the scene for you. I was around 19 at the time, living in England, home for a visit. I had big exams coming up, the pressure was real, and my mother, who had always been a little more open to these things than I was, said she knew someone, a fortune teller, not some flashy storefront type with neon signs and crystal balls, just a quiet older man, living in a village so small it wasn't even worth looking up. No internet, no travel, no contact with the outside world to speak of. She said people came from hours away to see him, that he had once held a man's hand and told him he had cancer in a place no doctor had looked yet, and he was right. I figured at worst it would take my mind off the exams. He made 7 predictions that afternoon, 7, and I wrote every single one of them down. The first one came while he was still placing his hand on my forehead. He hadn't even fully settled into his chair. He looked at me and said, "Don't worry about your exams, you'll get 82%. That's exactly what you need." I remember almost laughing. 82%? That specific? I wasn't even studying well at that point. I'd only started taking things seriously in the last couple of months. But I wrote it down, and I went back to England, and when my results came in, 82%. Exactly. I sat there staring at that number on my screen for a long time. The second prediction was stranger, and honestly a little unsettling. He told me I had problems with my liver. Now you have to understand, I was 18 years old. I played football, rowing, tennis. I barely drank. I ate well. I was in better shape than most people I knew. The idea that something was wrong with my liver seemed almost insulting. But my mother, being my mother, took me straight to a doctor, and the doctor found it, an enlarged liver, hardened. They had no explanation for what caused it. 2 months of a strict diet later, it was completely back to normal. A condition I didn't know I had, in an organ I had no symptoms from, diagnosed by a man who never went to medical school and who held my hand for 30 seconds. I stopped laughing at this point. The third prediction took years to unfold, which almost made it worse. He told me I would travel to Finland for work when I was 23, but not before then. At the time, I had never been anywhere near the Nordic countries. I had no connection to Finland, no reason to ever go. It seemed like the vaguest, most random thing he could have said. Then last December, my management sent me on a business trip, Estonia and Finland. No input from me on the scheduling, no control over the dates, no say in the itinerary. I landed in Finland the day before I turned 24, the day before. If the trip had been pushed back by 48 hours in either direction, it would have been a completely different story. But it wasn't. It landed exactly where he said it would, right at the edge of 23. Now here's where it gets hard to explain away. The 7th prediction, and I'm jumping ahead because this one haunts me the most. He said that when he concentrated on my future, he kept seeing a word around me, over and over. He said it slowly, like he was reading something out loud that confused even him. Suomi. None of us knew what that meant. He didn't know. My mother didn't know. I didn't know. We assumed it was just some word, maybe meaningless, maybe something lost in translation. I went home and typed it into Google. Suomi is the Finnish word for Finland. This man, who had never left his village, who had no internet, who had no connection to the outside world, somehow had the word for Finland orbiting my future so prominently that he could feel it. And on that business trip I mentioned, I made connections, colleagues who reached out afterward, a potential position, a conversation that's still ongoing. I may be moving to Finland. He also said I'd probably spend most of my life there, maybe even the rest of it. There are still 3 predictions left to land. He said I'd have 1,000 employees under my management by the time I'm 28. Right now I manage around 30, so that's a stretch. but I'm working toward project management, so I'm not ruling it out. He said I'd traveled to Russia exactly twice in my entire life, which, given everything happening between Ukraine and Russia right now, feels like it carries a weight I didn't expect when he said it. And he said I'd marry a blonde woman and have 2 daughters. That one I'm still waiting on, but I'll tell you this, I've always wanted daughters, not sons. I couldn't tell you why, it's just always been there. And I grew up surrounded by women, sisters, aunts, grandmothers, so maybe it makes sense. Or maybe he already knows something I don't. What I keep coming back to is this, who is this man? He saved my father's friend's life by detecting early-stage cancer before any doctor found it. He sat with my grandmother for 15 minutes and pulled her out of a depression that had lasted years. He told a 19-year-old kid his exact exam score, found a hidden liver condition, and described a country the kid wouldn't visit for 4 more years, using only that country's own native word for itself. And he's never left his village. He has no phone, no internet, no way to know any of this. I don't have an explanation for what he is or what he does. I'm still that rational, practical person who doesn't believe in things he can't prove. But I already have a flight connection saved to Helsinki, and I didn't plan it that way. Story 13. There are things that happen in life that you can't put into a neat little box. Things you can't explain away, no matter how hard you try. And sometimes, the universe finds the most beautiful, heartbreaking way to make you feel like someone you lost is still right there beside you. This is one of those stories, and I need you to understand I'm still processing it, even now. Growing up, my brother Ryan was my whole world. He was 4 years older than me, and I thought he was the coolest person alive. Whatever he was into, I wanted to be into it too. Wherever he went, I wanted to follow. He was my role model, my best friend, the person I measured myself against without even knowing I was doing it. And Ryan was obsessed with butterflies. I mean truly, genuinely obsessed. Not in a weird way, in the most pure, tender way you could imagine. He raised them from cocoons. He knew the name of every species. He could spot the difference between a monarch and a viceroy from across a yard, and he'd talk about it for 20 minutes if you let him. When they passed away, he kept them carefully, gently, because he thought they were beautiful and he didn't want to let them go. I was maybe 9 or 10 back then, tagging along the way little brothers do. I didn't care that much about butterflies on their own, but I cared about Ryan, so I cared about butterflies. But here's the thing, the butterflies never cared about me, not even a little. We'd go places like Butterfly World, those big enclosed gardens where the butterflies are so used to humans they'll land on anyone, and they'd land on Ryan constantly, like he was a flower, like they just knew. They'd land on strangers, on little kids, on our mom, but never on me. I thought it was funny at the time. I thought it was just one of those things. I had no idea it meant something. Years passed the way years do, and life got harder. Ryan struggled as he got older. Addiction found him the way it finds a lot of bright, sensitive people. Quietly at first, then all at once. It pushed us apart in ways that still hurt to think about. We weren't as close anymore. There were long silences between us. But on his good days, we'd still talk. We'd still find each other somehow. The last time I saw him in person, we were at our mom's house, both of us sitting in that familiar living room, the one where we'd grown up. And somehow the conversation drifted, the way late-night conversations always do, into the strange and the unexplained. Ghosts, things we'd seen together as kids, things that had always made us feel like maybe the world had more layers to it than most people acknowledged. We talked about the attic. I hadn't thought about that in years. We were young, maybe 7 and 11, and we'd been in that attic 100 times. It was just an attic, dusty, low-ceilinged, kind of dark. But one afternoon we climbed up there, and it was full of monarch butterflies. Maybe 10 of them, maybe more. Just there, orange and black, and completely still, resting on the walls and the rafters like they'd always lived there. We played in that attic for what felt like hours. Neither of us said much. We just existed in this strange, quiet room full of butterflies, and it felt like a secret that belonged only to us, where the next morning they were gone. We never told our parents. I'm not even sure we fully understood what we'd seen until we talked about it again that last night together. And then the conversation shifted. Ryan got quiet for a second, thoughtful, and he asked, almost like he was just wondering out loud, whether he thought humans could reincarnate into anything, like a butterfly. He said it casually, like it was just a question. We moved on pretty quickly, talked about other things, and eventually I went home. 3 weeks later, Ryan was gone. He was 23 years old. It happened in late January, deep in the middle of winter, cold, grey, the kind of month when nothing blooms and nothing moves, and the world feels like it's holding its breath. And then a bright orange butterfly appeared outside my house, just sitting there in February in the cold. I stood at the window and stared at it for a long time. I didn't know what to think. I told myself it was a coincidence, a weird one, sure, but just a coincidence. The butterfly didn't survive the cold. Of course it didn't. And I let it go. But then things started happening that I couldn't let go. Butterflies started following me. Not once in a while, not occasionally, constantly, persistently, in ways that the people around me started noticing and commenting on because they couldn't explain it either. We don't live in a place known for butterflies. This isn't the Florida coast or some nature preserve. It's just a regular town. But they find me anyway. One landed on my head while I was walking to work, just dropped out of the sky and sat there. One landed on my leg while I was sunbathing, completely silently, and scared me half to death when I looked down. Last summer, a group of 15 of us went floating down a river in a different town. 3 hours on tubes, just drifting. Halfway through the trip, a butterfly landed on my arm and stayed there, rode the whole stretch of river with me. The whole group saw it. Some of them tried to get it to come near them. It wouldn't. It just stayed with me. Nobody said anything for a while. And then this morning, I got home from an overnight shift, tired, ready to sleep, and sitting on my front step was a butterfly. Bright, brand new looking, not a scratch on it, but it wouldn't fly. It just sat there. I checked it over. No damage, no injury, nothing visibly wrong. It fluttered around a little when I got close, but it didn't leave. I fed it, found it a warm, sunny spot near the door, and as of right now, hours later, it's still there, waiting. I don't know what to do with any of this. I really don't. Part of me wants to believe it's Ryan. Part of me feels almost embarrassed to say that out loud, because it sounds like something you say when you're grieving and desperate for signs, and your brain starts seeing patterns everywhere. But I keep coming back to that last conversation, the way he said it so quietly, like maybe a butterfly. I wonder, why would he say that? Out of everything we talked about, why that? And why won't they leave me alone? Why, after a lifetime of butterflies ignoring me completely, do they now find me like I'm the only person in the room? What I'd give to call him right now and tell him what's been happening. What I'd give to hear him laugh about it, or get excited, or say something like, I told you there was something more to this. That's the part that breaks me, not the strangeness of it. I can almost live with the strangeness. It's the fact that I want to tell him, and I can't. And all I have is this feeling that maybe he already knows, that maybe he's the one doing the telling, and I'm finally the one who's listening. Story 14. It started when I was 16, an ordinary Tuesday. My sister Emma and I were walking home for lunch, like we did almost every day, half a block from Jefferson High. The sun was out, cars were moving, everything felt completely normal, and then it wasn't. There was a girl from Emma's class, I'll call her Brittany, in the school parking lot. She'd somehow gotten the keys to somebody's car and was doing donuts. Reckless, loud, the kind of thing teenagers do when they think nothing bad can actually happen to them. And then something went wrong. The front passenger door swung open. The girl inside, she looked terrified, like she'd been trying to get out and the spin had thrown the door wide. And before anyone could process what was happening, she was gone, pulled under, I saw it, every single second of it. The driver, she must have panicked, must have thought the girl was still on top of the car, not beneath it, because she reversed, and she backed right over her again. I knew, before anyone said a word, I knew. And then I saw something else. Just above the roof of that car, maybe 3-4 feet up, there was a light. Not a reflection, not a glare from the windshield. Something else. It looked like refracted light, mixed with mist, like when you see heat rising off summer asphalt, but slower, gentler, and it moved upward, just drifted, quietly, and then it was gone, just gone, like it was never there. Emma ran down the block to find a phone and call 911. I couldn't move. I was on the side of the road, dry heaving into the grass, shaking, because I am someone who feels other people's pain in a way I genuinely cannot explain, always have been. And what I had just watched, it broke something open in me that didn't fully close again for a long time. I didn't tell anyone what I saw, the light, the mist. I figured, who would believe me? I barely believed myself, so I folded it up, stored it somewhere quiet in the back of my mind, and eventually I almost forgot. Almost. Fast forward about 12 years. I was in my late 20s by then. My best friend Rachel was driving me out to SeaTac on the old Highway 99 viaduct. Classic Seattle. Gray sky, coffee in the cup holder, radio low. I was headed out for a work trip. Completely ordinary morning, and then Rachel slowed the car. There'd been an accident just ahead of us, fresh, still unfolding. An SUV was on its side, wheels pointing out toward the water. A woman nearby was hyperventilating, full panic attack. Another woman, calm, focused, was already kneeling next to the motorcyclist on the ground. One hand reaching out slowly, searching. I watched her hand, and then I saw it again. The same thing, that refracted shimmer, that soft, foggy translucence, rising slowly upward from him, moving the way smoke moves when there's no wind, unhurried, silent, and then it dissolved, just faded into the air like it had somewhere better to be. A moment later, the woman kneeling lowered her head, no pulse. I sat in that car for a long moment, completely still. Rachel didn't notice. She was watching the scene ahead of us, but I was somewhere else entirely. Because here's what I keep coming back to. Here's what I can't shake even now. I didn't see this once. I saw it twice. 12 years apart, under circumstances where there was no reasonable source for reflected light, no matching angles, no mirrors, no tricks. Just two people in two very different places, leaving, and the same impossible thing rising after them. What is it? I've turned it over more times than I can count. Some part of me wants to call it a soul, that simple, ancient word that humanity has reached for in every language, in every century, because nothing else quite fits. But another part of me, the part that reads and questions and can't help but push, wonders if it's something science just doesn't have the right vocabulary for yet. What if every living thing is at its core a temporary arrangement of particles? Particles that came from stars, from supernovae that burned out billions of years before any of us existed. And what if when that arrangement ends, when the thing that held those particles together finally lets go, they don't just vanish? What if they return? Not with drama, not with lightning or trumpets, just quietly, a shimmer, a drift upward, a gentle release back into whatever came before us. I can't prove that. I don't have a photograph. I don't have a measurement. I have exactly 2 moments in my life where I was standing close enough and still enough to see something I was never supposed to be looking for. And this isn't the only experience I've had. There have been others, things that don't fit neatly into the world we're taught to expect. Moments that knock on the edge of what we think we understand. But these stay with me the most, because I wasn't looking for something that day in the parking lot. I was 16, walking home for lunch, and I wasn't looking for something on that viaduct in Seattle. I was just a passenger in a car. Sometimes I think that's the only way you ever see the real things, not when you're searching, but when you're just present, still, not expecting anything at all. I still don't have an answer, and maybe that's the point. Maybe some things aren't meant to be explained, only witnessed, only carried, only shared quietly in the dark with someone else who's been awake at 2 a.m. turning the same questions over and over in their mind. Maybe you have your own version of this story, something you saw, something that didn't fit, something you never told anyone because you weren't sure you'd be believed. You don't have to explain it, not tonight. Just rest and know that some of the most important things that have ever happened to anyone happened without a single witness who could prove it. And yet, they were real. Story 15. I was 6 years old. We lived way out in the countryside, the kind of place where nighttime is almost completely silent. No traffic, no neighbors, no street lights, just darkness and the sound of the wind through the trees. My parents had tucked me in, kissed me goodnight, and closed the door, and for a while everything was perfectly fine. Then I heard it, long fingernails slowly dragging across the wooden floor, coming from right underneath my bed. I remember my whole body going cold. My stomach just dropped. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't do anything except stare up at the ceiling, completely frozen, while the scratching just continued. And then it stopped. I was about to call out for my dad when I heard the floor creak, and a figure slowly crawled out from under my bed and stood up in the dark beside me. It was tall. It just stood there, not moving. Then a voice, quiet and calm, said 4 words: "You forgot to say your prayers." It was my dad's voice. I was almost sure of it. My dad always reminded me before bed, always made a point of it. So in that moment I told myself it had to be him. He must have stayed behind in my room and hidden under there as some kind of prank. But here's the thing, my dad has never admitted to it. Not once. Not in 20 years. I've asked him dozens of times over the years, and every single time, he looks me straight in the eye and says he has no idea what I'm talking about. And I know my dad. He loves scary stuff. If he had actually hidden under his 6-year-old son's bed and scared him half to death, he would own that. He'd be bragging about it at every family dinner. But he never has. And the more I think about it, the more I realize something else doesn't add up. My dad couldn't easily fit under that bed. There's no way he could have gotten under there after tucking me in without me noticing. And even if he had somehow managed it, my dad keeps his nails short. Whatever made that deep, dragging, scratching sound across the wood that night, it wasn't short nails. I've tried to make sense of it over the years. Maybe it was sleep paralysis. Maybe I drifted off without realizing it, and the whole thing was some vivid, terrifying dream. That's the explanation I try to settle on when the memory creeps back in. But I was wide awake when it happened. I'm almost certain of it. And here's the part that really stays with me. The part that makes me pause every time I think about it. Whatever was under my bed that night knew to say exactly what my dad would say. I still don't know what was in my room, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. Story 16. It's been years, and I still haven't found an explanation that makes sense. This happened somewhere deep in the mountains of West Virginia, where the woods press in from every direction, and nighttime is a darkness that you can't imagine unless you stood inside it. There are no streetlights, no distant traffic hum, just trees and silence and whatever else is out there. It was a Friday night. My buddy Cole was at my place. We were doing the usual things, watching fights, playing Xbox, just killing time. But it got late, really late, past 1 in the morning, and we were bored out of our minds. So Cole says, "Let's walk the trail." There's a path about 5 minutes from my house, cuts straight into the forest, maybe a mile long. We'd walked it 100 times. We knew every bend, or at least, we thought we did. We headed out with just our phones for light. The air was thick and warm, and the second we stepped into the trees, something felt different. The forest was loud that night. Crickets, frogs, rustling in the branches above us, things moving in the dark just off the trail. That's not unusual out here. Animals do that. They scatter when people walk through. but the sheer amount of activity at that hour, it was unsettling in a way I couldn't put words to. Cole noticed it too. We didn't say much, just kept walking. We made it about halfway in, maybe 30 minutes, and stopped to take a break. That's when the forest went quiet. Not gradually, not the way sounds taper off when you've been standing still too long, all at once, like someone hit a switch. Every cricket, every frog, every rustle in the leaves, gone. And then we heard the voice. I want to be clear about what this sounded like, because I know how this part goes. I know people hear a voice in the woods and they picture someone joking around, a drunk camper, a prank. This was none of that. It sounded mechanical, shaky, like a warped recording coming from a broken speaker, the kind of old toy that's running low on batteries and the audio keeps pitching up and down. But there was something almost human underneath it, something that made the hairs on my arms stand straight up, and it just kept going, over and over, the same pattern of sounds, cycling. Cole looked at me, I looked at him, and without saying a single word, we ran. We turned and sprinted back the way we came, hard as we could, and here's what I still can't wrap my head around. The voice did not get quieter. We were running away from it, full sprint, and no matter how much distance we put between us and that spot, the voice stayed at the exact same volume, like it was right beside us, like it was keeping up, without ever getting closer. Who does that? What does that? We kept running, both of us gasping, almost crying, and I am not ashamed to say that. Whatever pride I might have had about being scared disappeared the moment I heard that sound. We could see the end of the trail. The tree line was maybe 5 minutes ahead, and that's when it screamed, from directly behind us. Close, too close. I know what mountain lions sound like. I've heard them before, out here, that eerie, almost human wail they make at night. This was not that. This scream shook my chest. It sent birds erupting out of the trees all around us. And it wasn't a cry of an animal in pain or a person startled awake. It was rage. It was violence. It was the most depraved, awful sound I have ever heard in my life, and I felt it in my bones. We didn't stop. We cleared the trail, sprinted to my car, got inside and locked the doors. Neither of us spoke for a long time. I've told this story to maybe 3 people. Every single one of them has brushed it off. And I get it. I do. But I was there. I felt what that night felt like. And I've spent years going over every rational explanation I can think of. I still don't have one. I was never the type to believe in things I couldn't explain. I've always been a skeptic. But something was out there in those woods that night. Something that didn't move like an animal, didn't sound like a person, and didn't follow any rule I understand. And the part that stays with me, the part I can never shake, is that it let us leave. I still don't know what was out there. Story 17. Something happened to me on the drive home from work, and I still don't fully understand it. It was the early hours of July 4th, 2020. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the dairy plant where I work, Northeast Ohio. Deep summer, the kind of night where the air sits heavy and the fog rolls in off the fields like it owns the place. I was tired, hungry, running on autopilot, same as every other night. I had my podcast going. I was thinking about whether I wanted a sausage biscuit or a McGriddle, and I was keeping one eye on the tree line the way you do when you've driven that stretch of road 100 times, and you know the deer like to dart out with zero warning. I'd been driving that route for about 2 months at that point. Same road, same fog, same 35 miles between work and home. After the first 20 miles or so, the residential neighborhoods fall away and you're just in the woods, long stretches of nothing but tree line and headlights and whatever's out there in the dark. I grew up near forests. They don't scare me. At least, they didn't. That's when I saw the eyes, just off the shoulder, reflecting back at me through the fog, low to the ground. Animal eyes. My brain said coyote, and I slowed down because that's just what you do. Around here, coyotes aren't rare. I'd seen them near my high school, cutting across parking lots like they owned the place. So when this one slipped out of the tree line and started moving across the road, I didn't panic. I just tapped the brake and waited. But it didn't keep walking. It stopped, right in the middle of the road, and it turned and sat down facing my car, maybe 10 feet from my bumper, just sitting there, calm as anything, looking directly at me. I sat there too. No other cars, no sound except my engine and whatever was coming through my speakers. I figured it would get up and move on in a second. Animals always do. I honked the horn, and then it smiled at me. I want to be careful with that word. I'm not saying it grinned like a person. I'm saying the muscles in its face moved in a way that pulled its lips back. And what I saw underneath were not the teeth of a coyote. They were flat, squared, arranged in a way that I have only ever seen in a human mouth. My brights were on. The distance was 10 feet. I saw it clearly. My heart just stopped. It lasted maybe 1 second, 1 full second of that thing looking at me with those teeth showing. And then it stood up, turned around, and walked back into the woods. Slow, no rushing, like it had made its point. I sat in the dark for a few seconds after it disappeared. I couldn't move. Every hair on my body was standing. My hands were on the wheel, but I couldn't feel them. Then I floored it. I didn't stop for food. I didn't stop for anything. The whole rest of the drive home, I kept asking myself whether I'd imagined it. But I know what I saw. The brights were on. It was 10 feet away. You don't hallucinate that kind of detail. I grew up hearing about skinwalkers. I'm Native American, and that word carries weight in my family. But I'd never thought about it as something I might actually encounter, not on a county road in Ohio, not on my way home from a dairy plant at 4 in the morning. Maybe it was something else. Maybe there's an explanation I haven't thought of. I genuinely don't know. What I do know is that I'm taking a different route to work from now on, and I'm not sure I'll ever fully shake the feeling of something sitting in the dark at the edge of those headlights, looking back at me and choosing to smile. Story 18. My girlfriend Sarah has lived in that little bungalow on the edge of Millbrook for years. And from the very first time I walked through that door, something felt off. Not dangerous, not threatening, just wrong. Like the air was thicker there, like the walls remembered something the rest of us had forgotten. I told her that for years. She just laughed it off, but she knew. Deep down, she knew too. One evening, she was sitting alone in the living room. Nothing unusual, just the TV on low. The kind of quiet Tuesday night where nothing happens. She was relaxed, comfortable, and then she felt it. That feeling, the one you get when you're sure someone is in the room with you, even though you just checked and no one's there. She turned her head slowly, and that's when she saw him. A man, sitting on the sofa, right beside her. Not her sofa, a different sofa. Furniture she had never owned, never bought, never seen before in her life. He had his feet up on one of those small wooden ottomans, an old-style one, and he was wearing a bowler hat, the kind you'd see in photographs from 100 years ago. He wasn't a shadow, he wasn't a blur, he was completely solid, real, like he'd always been there. And here's the part that changed everything. He turned and looked at her too. For a brief, impossible moment, they just stared at each other, both of them equally surprised, both of them trying to make sense of what they were seeing. And then, almost without thinking, they both smiled. This strange, confused, what-on-earth smile, like two people who had just accidentally walked into the wrong room at the same time. And then he was gone. No sound, no flash, no dramatic moment. He just wasn't there anymore. Sarah sat completely still for a long time after that. She wasn't terrified. She was something harder to name than terrified. She was shaken in the way you get when reality does something it was never supposed to do. She didn't tell me for a long time. She was worried I wouldn't believe her, but I believe her completely. Because here's what I've been thinking about ever since she told me. What if he wasn't a ghost at all? What if he was just a man, a real, living man, sitting in his own home, on his own furniture, in his own time, and for one impossible split second, two different moments in history cracked open and bumped into each other. A glitch, a seam in time that pulled apart just long enough for two people from completely different eras to look each other in the eyes. She was the ghost to him. Think about that for a second. To that man in the bowler hat, Sarah was the one who appeared out of nowhere. Sarah was the one sitting in his living room, on furniture he didn't recognize, in a version of his house he'd never seen. And then just like that, she vanished. He probably sat there shaken too, wondering what he'd just seen. Now, that house, that strange, weird little bungalow in Millbrook, I've had sleep paralysis exactly 4 times in my life. All 4 of them happened in that house. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, completely unable to move, feeling something dark and heavy pressing down on me, a presence standing over me, and not a vague feeling either, a specific, deliberate weight, like something was making sure I couldn't get up. Since I moved out, nothing, not once, not in 10 years. There's something about that place, always has been. The walls hold things, the air sits different, and I think whatever that house is sitting on, whatever energy runs through those floorboards and up through the walls, it's old, older than the house itself, and maybe it doesn't just hold memories. Maybe it holds moments, real ones, slipping through, bleeding from one time into another. And sometimes, just sometimes, 2 people from completely different centuries end up in the same room for just long enough to notice each other. I still think about the look on his face, the way Sarah described it, that flash of recognition, of shared confusion, 2 people realizing at exactly the same moment that something had gone completely, quietly wrong with the world, and then gone. I don't know what that house is sitting on. I'm not sure I want to, but I know this: Sarah doesn't lie, and she doesn't imagine things, and what she saw that night in Millbrook was real. Story 19. It started in my late 20s. I was lost, not in a dramatic way, just the quiet, slow kind of lost that creeps up on you when you're lying in bed at 2 a.m., wondering if this is really it. I had a job, it paid the bills, but something felt deeply, fundamentally wrong, like I was wearing someone else's life. And then one night, I fell asleep, and everything changed. I found myself standing somewhere that didn't feel like a dream. It felt more real than anything I had ever experienced while awake. I was before something enormous, a presence, a light so brilliant it had weight to it. And the moment I became aware of where I was, my legs gave out. I didn't choose to fall. My body just surrendered. I hit the floor flat, face down, arms out, on what felt like cold marble. And I couldn't move. Not because I was paralyzed, because I was terrified in a way I have no human word for. Then a voice spoke, not into my ears, into me, straight into the center of whatever I am. And it said, "I'm going to show you something. You need to stand up." I tried. I genuinely tried. But every time I got even close to upright, I threw myself back down because looking at that light directly felt impossible, like trying to stare into the sun from 6 inches away. But here's the thing, it was patient. Whatever this presence was, it waited, and then slowly, something shifted. The light changed. The overwhelming brightness pulled back, and when I looked up again, it had taken the shape of a person, a man, or something like a man, calm, still, with a faint blue glow around the edges of him, like sunlight through water. And I stood up. He showed me something, an image, specific, visual. I saw a place, a sign, something that anchored itself in my mind like a photograph, burned into the back of my eyes. And then he said 3 words, just 3, This is it. And before I could ask a single question, he grew, enormous, towering. He reached down and scooped me up in the palm of his hand like I weighed nothing. And then he blew on me, gently, the way a child blows dandelion seeds into a summer wind. I felt myself flying, through nothing, through everything. And then, I hit my mattress, hard. I mean hard. The kind of impact that woke up every nerve in my body at once, that snapped me upright, gasping, before I even knew I was awake. Now let me tell you something. You know that falling dream, that little jerk of your body right before you drift off, that tiny drop. This was nothing like that. This was like I had been dropped from somewhere above the bed. I lay there in the dark, heart hammering, trying to understand what had just happened to me, trying to figure out how I had hit a mattress with that kind of force. I still don't have an answer for that. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. Even now, decades later, I wasn't raised religious. Sunday school as a kid, sure, enough to know the basics. But God wasn't a daily presence in my house. There were no prayers at dinner, no church on Sundays. So when I tell you this didn't feel like something my own mind constructed, I mean it. This felt visited. This felt external. This felt like something came to find me specifically. And what he showed me, I spent years thinking I understood it. I took it in the broadest sense possible. I went back to school. I shifted direction. I followed a path that made no obvious logical sense at the time. One door, then another, then someone mentioning something offhand, then a vacancy, then another turn. To give you a sense of it, without giving myself away, imagine he had shown you a sign outside a specific building, say City Hall in Des Moines, and you didn't know what to make of it. So you thought, okay, Iowa. Maybe this is about Iowa. So you started learning about Iowa. And while you were learning, an opportunity appeared, not in Des Moines, but somewhere nearby. And while you were there, someone said, hey, there's something opening up in Des Moines specifically. And then you went. And then, while you were there, you realized the exact job he had shown you was suddenly vacant. And you took it. And one morning, sitting at your desk doing work that barely existed as a profession 20 years ago, you looked around and realized with your whole body that you were standing exactly where you had been shown you would stand. The job I do now is rare, specific. Almost nobody knows it exists. It's connected to the environment, to the earth, to something that feels like it matters in a way my old work never did. And I followed a trail of breadcrumbs I didn't even know I was following until I arrived. I never fully explained this to anyone. Not the dream, not the way I hit the mattress, not the quiet certainty that I had been guided somewhere on purpose. Because how do you say that out loud without watching the other person's face change? But here's the thing he said that I think about more than anything else. More than the light, more than the voice, more than the impact of hitting that bed. He said every single human being was his child, every one of us. He didn't name a religion, he didn't rank anyone. He just said he speaks to all of us in whatever way each of us is most likely to actually hear. I just happen to be on the dream list. And I wonder sometimes how many other people are out there right now in their late 20s, lying in the dark, feeling lost, wearing someone else's life, who already got their message and haven't figured out yet what it means. I wonder if you're one of them. Story 20. It still keeps me up at night, 20 years later. It started the way most things do in high school. Someone ran their mouth. A kid named Derek started talking trash about me to anyone who would listen. And look, I was never the type to let things slide. So I found him, pulled him aside, and told him in no uncertain terms to cut it out. We got into a brief scuffle. I thought it was done. It wasn't. Word kept spreading, and every new story he told made me sound worse than the last. So I did what any hot-headed 16-year-old would do. I decided to make a scene. I put the word out, told everyone I knew to show up in the East Corridor Friday afternoon. Just be there, I said. And they were. Except, it wasn't just my people. The hallway was packed, wall to wall, kids I didn't even recognize. That should have been the first sign that something was off, but I was too far gone to notice. I spotted Derek at the far end of the hall, peeking around the corner like he knew what was coming. I walked toward him. The entire crowd fell in behind me without a word, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't going how I planned. I got close to him, close enough to see his eyes, and they were full, not with anger, not with defiance. His eyes were welling up with tears, and he wouldn't even look at me. He just stood there, frozen, and something inside my chest cracked, like a hand reached in and smacked me and said, "What are you doing right now? Stop." I tried to give him an out, mumbled something like, "Forget it, let's just drop it." A teacher stepped in seconds later and broke it up. That should have been the end of the story. But the next morning, 7 different people came up to me. Girls, guys, kids from towns I'd never even visited. Every single one of them said the same thing: "Thank you for standing up to him." And I just stared at them, because I hadn't stood up to him. I tried to humiliate him. Each story they told was worse than the last. What he'd done, who he'd targeted. I started to feel sick, like I'd stumbled into something much bigger than a high school beef, and now I couldn't find the exit. Then came the next day. I got called down to the principal's office. Standard stuff, just to check in to make sure the situation was handled. I was halfway down the staircase when the office door opened and Derek walked out, heading up. I don't know why I did it. I genuinely don't, but I called out to him. Big smile on my face. Friendly, loud. "You," like we were old friends. He looked up, then immediately back down at the floor. I stopped at the landing where the upper and lower stairs meet, and I said, "So what's up, man? You want to handle this one-on-one, or are you good?" Even as it came out of my mouth, I cringed. I was like, "Why did you just say that?" He walked right past me, didn't break stride, didn't lift his head. I turned to head down, and that's when the hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. Every single one of them. I don't know how to explain what happened next without sounding completely out of my mind, but I turned around and I caught the side of his face, and he was smiling. Not a laugh, not a smirk, a sadistic, controlled, deliberate smile. And his eyes were saying something so clearly it felt like I heard it out loud, like his voice was echoing inside my skull, full of hatred, full of something I'd never felt directed at me before. My whole body went haywire. I scrambled up those stairs after him. On my hands and knees, I caught up to him, and I was whispering, close enough that he could feel my breath. 10 feet, 20 feet, down the hallway, and to his credit, he didn't even flinch. Walked like a soldier, like I wasn't even there. I was seething. I didn't know what I was or what I was doing. Eventually he turned a corner and vanished, gone, like smoke. I just stood there in the empty hallway, shaking. When I got to the principal's office, I sat down across from him and said, "I'm fine, but I don't think he's handling this well." The principal tilted his head and said he seemed completely fine to me. I just shook my head slowly. I didn't push it. I didn't want to be the kid who blew something up over a staircase smile. But inside I knew that look wasn't fine. That look wasn't normal. I went home an hour later. My phone buzzed. A message from someone I knew. "Did you hear what happened?" I hadn't. And then the next message came, and I just sat there, staring at the screen. I cried for a long time that night, and not for the reason you might think, because that wasn't the look of someone saying goodbye. What I saw on that staircase was pure, concentrated rage. It was aimed outward, not inward, And something about that made everything feel even more wrong and more confusing than it already was. The weeks that followed were a blur of assemblies and counselors and hushed conversations in hallways. I was pulled into the office so many times my mum started coming with me. The principal kept repeating the same sentence over and over. It wasn't your fault. Like he knew something I didn't. Like he'd already been briefed. I never fully got over it. For a long time, I just carried it. Buried it under other things. Other bad decisions. Didn't tell a soul outside my family. Then 20 years passed. I was talking to a girl I'd known since elementary school. We'd lost touch in middle school, and I hadn't seen her since. I asked her why I never ran into her in high school, and she went quiet for a second. Then she started telling me a story. She said she used to pick up her younger brother from class sometimes. He was autistic, sweet kid, and one afternoon she walked in and found an older student doing something to him that I won't repeat here. When she walked in, he ran at her, grabbed her, put his hands on her throat, and told her he'd kill her if she told anyone. She kept quiet for a while. Eventually she did tell someone, and then, she said, she started noticing him, watching her, peeking around corners, stalking her movements between classes, until one day he got into a confrontation with someone in the hallway. And after that, she never saw him again. I felt the blood leave my face. What was his name? I asked, very quietly. She said it without hesitating. First name, last name, middle name, all three, clear as day, like it was burned into her permanently. The way people only remember names that terrified them, I already knew before she finished. That was the moment I understood. Not just what had happened, but why I felt what I felt on that staircase. Why my body went into overdrive. Why something in me knew without knowing. I hadn't been picking a fight with a troubled kid. I'd walked into something else entirely, and didn't have the words for it at 16. I've thought about this a lot since then. About the pattern I've noticed across my own life. The confrontations I've been pulled into. The people on the other end of them. Looking back, every single one was hiding something dark. Something that had nothing to do with me. Like I was just the person who happened to be standing between them and the next person they were going to hurt. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means anything at all. But I know what I felt on that staircase. And I know what she told me 20 years later confirmed it. Some things you just feel in your bones before you can explain them. And sometimes the explanation arrives long after it's too late to change anything. I still think about that staircase. I still think about that smile. And honestly, I'm not sure I'll ever stop. Story 21. My grandfather grew up in a small coastal town in the Philippines. Half his blood was Filipino, half was American. And every summer, my mom's family would go back to visit him. A few weeks ago, he finally told me a story from when he was 18. The way he told it, his hands were shaking the whole time. It started in the summer of 1970. His name was Eddie, and the girl he was seeing, let's call her Clara. Clara was the kind of girl you couldn't stop thinking about. Sweet, warm, and so easy to be around. They'd been together for over a year by the time she asked him to visit her family. She was staying with her aunt in Eddie's town while she went to school. But her parents, they lived 5 hours away, out in the countryside, far from anything Eddie knew. He almost said no. The area was rural, remote, the kind of place that felt like it existed slightly outside of the normal world. But Eddie was young, and he was in love, so he said yes, and that was the decision that changed everything. They took a bus out to her hometown. As soon as they stepped off, Eddie noticed something was wrong. People stopped what they were doing, and they stared. Not the polite, curious kind of staring you get when you're a stranger in a small town. This was different. This was the kind of staring that made the back of your neck go cold. And at one point, Eddie heard two men whispering to each other as he passed. One of them said a word he didn't recognize at the time, aswang. In Filipino folklore, the aswang is one of the most feared creatures that exists. By day, they look completely human. They live among people. They smile. They shake your hand. They invite you into their homes. But at night, they become something else entirely. Something that feeds, something that hunts. Clara showed him around the town, trying to keep things light, but Eddie couldn't shake the feeling that every set of eyes they passed was following them. He kept telling himself he was being paranoid. He kept telling himself it was just a small town. People were just curious about an outsider. He almost convinced himself. Then they arrived at her family home. It was a large wooden house, 3 stories tall, older than it looked. Clara's parents were waiting at the door, and they greeted Eddie warmly. Her father shook his hand. Her mother brought out food. They sat around the table and talked for hours. And Eddie thought to himself, these are perfectly normal people. He was embarrassed for even feeling uneasy. That night, he went to bed in Clara's room on the 2nd floor. He doesn't know what time it was when he woke up, but he was awake, and something was wrong. Clara wasn't in the bed. He told himself she probably went to the bathroom. He lay back down and stared at the ceiling, and that's when he heard it, coming from the floor above him, a scratching sound, like a cat slowly dragging its claws across old wooden floorboards, then mumbling, low, unclear, like someone talking to themselves in a language he couldn't quite make out. Eddie squeezed his eyes shut. He told himself it was nothing. Old houses make noise. He tried to fall back asleep, but the sounds got louder, more scratching, not just one, but several, like multiple animals up there, clawing and pacing across the floor above his head. And the mumbling was getting louder too, more voices. And then, thumping, heavy, deliberate, like someone jumping on the floor over and over. He pressed the pillow over both ears. He did not sleep that night. In the morning, he brought it up casually to Clara over breakfast. He told her the cats were really loud last night. He laughed a little as he said it, to keep things easy. Clara looked at him, and she said, "We don't have cats." The second night was worse. The scratching started again, same time, same place, and this time, something new joined it. A grunting sound, low and guttural, like an animal in pain, or something trying very hard to sound like one. Eddie lay completely still, not breathing, and then came a sound that made his blood go cold. A roar, not a scream, not a shout, a roar. He did not go upstairs, not yet. He spent the 3rd day trying to act normal, laughing at dinner, helping Clara's father in the yard, telling himself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe it was neighbors. Maybe there was something wrong with the plumbing. Maybe he was still half dreaming when he heard it. But on the 4th night, he decided he was going to find out what was up there. It was around 1 in the morning when he crept out of bed. Clara was gone again. He told himself she had a stomach thing. He told himself everything was fine. He moved quietly across the room, opened the door without a sound, and made his way to the staircase leading to the 3rd floor. He noticed immediately that it was dark, darker than it should have been. The lights on the 3rd floor weren't working. He flicked the switch once, twice, nothing. The only light coming in was from the moon through the windows. He made his way down the hall, toward the room directly above where he slept. And when he pushed the door open, the floor was covered in claw marks. Deep, gouged lines scratched across the wood in every direction. The windows were wide open, the curtains moving in the night air. And across the floorboards, dark stains, dried and scattered in patterns that made no sense if you were trying not to think about what made them. Eddie stood there in the moonlight for a long moment. Then he backed out of the room, walked back to the stairs, and that's when he noticed the smell. Something heavy and rotten, drifting up from the kitchen below. He wasn't sure how he hadn't noticed it earlier. He went down. He probably shouldn't have. The kitchen was pitch black. He felt his way along the counter, and his hand came to rest on something large, metal, and round. A cooking pot. He lifted the lid. A cloud of flies rushed out at him, and then the smell hit him full in the face, so foul it nearly dropped him to his knees. He couldn't see what was inside. He slammed the lid back down, walked back to the room, and lay down with his eyes wide open until morning. At lunch the next day, Clara's mother placed a dish on the table, a dark, rich stew. She said it was a traditional recipe. She was very eager for Eddie to eat. He said he wasn't feeling well. He'd had a bad stomach all morning. Clara's mother smiled and said he needed to keep his strength up. She pushed the bowl a little closer, and something about the way she said it made Eddie's skin crawl. That's when he remembered. There's an old belief about how to identify someone who isn't who they appear to be. You look into their eyes, and if something is wrong, truly wrong, your reflection doesn't look the way it should. It appears upside down. Eddie looked at Clara's mother. He held her gaze for just a second longer than was polite, and he reeled back. His reflection was upside down. Her expression changed. Instantly, the warmth drained out of her face like water through a crack, and she stared at him with something that wasn't quite human in it anymore. A look that said, clearly, you should not have done that. That night, Eddie packed everything he had. He kept his movements quiet and steady. He went downstairs, told Clara's parents there had been a family emergency, apologized for the short notice, and walked out the door. He did not look back. When he got home, he barely left his room for weeks. He jumped at sounds in the night. He didn't eat well. He didn't sleep well. He kept running through everything in his head over and over again, wondering if there was some explanation he had missed. A month later, he ended things with Clara. She met him quietly, and she looked at him with something in her eyes he couldn't quite name. Sadness, maybe, or something older than sadness. She said she understood. She said it was a wise choice, that it was a real shame, but that it was the right thing for him. And Eddie told me, when he finished the story, that he believed her. He said there was no anger in her voice when she said it, no bitterness, just a kind of calm, the kind of calm that comes from someone who has accepted something. He never went back. He never tried to explain it. And every now and then, in the years that followed, when a house felt slightly too quiet, or when lights didn't work the way they should, he'd remember that room on the 3rd floor, the claw marks in the moonlight, the open windows, and he'd remember that look on her mother's face, the moment she realized he knew. He told me he still doesn't know what was in that pot, and honestly, he doesn't want to. Story 22. Nobody ever believed me when I told this story, and honestly, I don't blame them. I wouldn't believe it either. But something happened in those woods outside of Cedar Ridge, Nevada, that changed the way I see the world, and I need to tell someone. Every year, our high school ran a camping trip up into the mountain range. We'd stay at a stretch of land inside a national park, the kind they rent out to tour groups, weddings, school programs. That year, we were the only ones out there. The entire section of the park, just us. No other groups, no other sounds except wind and pine, and the occasional distant creak of something you tell yourself is just a branch. We found it on the 3rd day. Nobody was looking for it. Someone threw a football too far. It rolled down a slope and disappeared into the tree line, and the guy who chased after it came back pale, like he'd seen something that didn't add up. He had, because there, deep in the woods, where no trail led, where no lights existed, where nothing indicated anyone had ever been, stood a 20-foot wooden cross, just standing there, silent, surrounded by trees, no pews, no signs, no path, just this massive cross, alone in the dark of the forest. And I remember the camp counselors going quiet when we told them, not the kind of quiet that means they're bored, the kind of quiet that means they already knew and they didn't want to talk about it. That bothered me more than the cross itself. A few nights later, they did the night hike. You know the kind. One at a time, up the mountain trail, eyes adjusted to the dark, walk down to the group waiting at the bottom. Just you, the moonlight, and a narrow dirt path cutting through the trees. I wasn't scared when it was my turn. I grew up in the desert. Rattlesnakes, scorpions, coyotes at the fence line. I'd seen things. The dark didn't shake me, but something did. I'd been walking maybe 2 minutes when I heard it. A branch snapping. Close, not behind me, ahead. And I knew it wasn't another student because the rule was strict. The next person wasn't sent down until the previous one reached the group at the bottom. There was no one else on this trail. There shouldn't have been. And then it hit me. That feeling, you know, the one where every muscle in your body locks up at once and something deep in your brain goes very, very still. Not fear exactly, more like recognition, like something ancient inside you waking up and whispering, you are being watched. I didn't stop walking. Some instinct told me that stopping was wrong, that whatever was in those trees, it was reading my reaction, that what I did next mattered in a way I couldn't explain. So I looked, I kept my pace, and I let my eyes drift sideways, slowly, into the dark between the trees. And what I saw, I've spent 10 years trying to find the right words for. It was tall, well over 6 feet. A man's torso, but wrong, stretched, gaunt. Ribs visible even from across the trail, like skin wrapped around a frame with nothing in between. It wore something dark, a cloak or a coat, ragged and torn at the edges, and where its head should have been, an elk skull, full antlers, sitting there like it belonged, like it had always been there. The antlers, I remembered noticing the antlers specifically, scuffed, patches of velvet missing. It was late summer, close to fall, and I learned later that's exactly when elk shed that soft fuzz as mating season begins. Why do I remember that detail? Because my brain was doing something strange in that moment. It was cataloging, storing everything, like part of me already knew I'd be trying to explain this for the rest of my life. And the smell, I forgot to mention the smell. Sweet and wrong, like something fresh had just stopped living. Not rotting, not old, just newly gone. It didn't move toward me. It didn't run. It just stood there. And as I passed, its head rotated, slowly, following me, like I was the thing being studied. I wanted to run. Every part of me was screaming to run. Instead, I slowed my breathing, kept my steps even, stared straight ahead, and I walked all the way to the bottom of that trail without looking back again, because somehow I knew that if I broke, if I showed it I was prey, everything would be different. I asked the guy who went before me if he'd seen anything. He hadn't. I asked the girl behind me the next morning. She hadn't either. Just me. Just that one walk, that one moment, and then nothing. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want the label. Didn't want the looks, so I carried it. About a year later, I started dating someone I'd met on that same trip. Things were good at first, quiet, easy, comfortable, and then slowly they weren't. It crept in, small things, a word said a certain way, a door blocked at just the right moment, a feeling of needing permission for ordinary things. It escalated the way those things do when you almost don't notice until you do. And by then, you're already deep in it. What made me leave was the feeling, that same feeling from the woods, like prey, like something was reading my every reaction, deciding what comes next based on what I showed. The moment I recognized it, I knew I had to get out, and I did. I've thought about the connection ever since. Was it a warning? Was it just a creature? Something from those mountains I'll never fully explain. that happened to cross my path? Or was it something older than that? Something that saw a girl walking alone in the dark and decided, for reasons I'll never understand, to show her what real fear felt like so she'd recognize it when it mattered? I've searched for other stories from that area. I've found almost nothing. Someone once told me it sounded like a figure from indigenous tradition, a guardian or a boundary marker between the human world and something else. I won't dismiss that. I have no way of knowing what it was, but I did come across the myth of a Celtic deity, a figure with antlers, cloaked in the energy of the wild, a protector of living things in the forest, someone who governs the cycle of life and death and whatever comes after. And I think about that sometimes. Maybe it saw me as one of its creatures for the night. Maybe it could only help me the one way available to it, by making sure I knew what real danger felt like, so that later, when danger wore a human face and whispered instead of roared, I'd still know. I still don't know what was standing in those trees, but I know what it gave me, and I'm not sure I'd take it back.